1, 2, 3, and... Well, I was rolling down that highway, listening to my radio, and the news was crying, bad to worse. The world's so full of woe. Sound familiar? When I spied a bumper sticker, they said it oh so good. It said, honk if you love Judas, and in parentheses, Jesus would. Honk if you love Judas, don't you know Jesus would? Christ preached compassion, peace, and brotherhood. So turn the other cheek in the love for which he stood. Oh, and honk if you love Judas, 'cause you know that Jesus would. Well, those words got me to thinking about the love that Jesus gave to the soldiers driving in those nails that sent him to his grave. He said, love those who hate us, and he showed us that we could. So honk if you love Judas, 'cause you know that Jesus would. Sing along with us now. Honk if you love Judas, don't you know that Jesus would? Christ preached compassion, Christ preached compassion, peace and sisterhood, peace and sisterhood. So turn the other cheek, in the love for which he stood, in the love for which he stood. Oh, and honk if you love Judas, 'cause you know that Jesus would. Well, it's such a heavy challenge, this old world so filled with night, and there's always some reason to hate someone or fight. Oh, but Jesus said it clearly. Love is not misunderstood, either feel it or you don't. So honk if you love Judas, Jesus would. Honk if you love Judas, don't you know that Jesus would? Christ preached compassion, peace and humanhood, peace and humanhood. So turn the other cheek in the love for which he stood. Oh, and honk if you love Judas, Jesus would. We're singing, honk if you love Judas, 'cause you know that Jesus would. Yes, he would. Yes, he would.
Welcome to another Question of Meaning with Arthur and Katie. And we thought we'd discuss religion today.
Oi.
Yeah. There should be a kind of fraught with anxiety here. Not really.
We'll have politics next week. We'll
That's
do
right.
back-to-back shows of things you should never talk about.
So what's the third? Sex, I think? I did that on purpose. I wanted to see what would happen when he was drinking.
Yoicks. Why not? Throw
Why
it
not?
into the mix. We'll do anything. Establishing our relationship here in Asheville. We just moved here 2 months ago, and we hope to be tarred and feathered and run out of town as soon as may be.
Well,
I want to go live on an island somewhere for the rest of my life. I'm getting tired of this scene.
when we were discussing doing religion, Arthur was like, "Well, God, it's gonna be kind of like, what are we gonna be, religion bashing?" And then we were making the list of songs. So this isn't religion bashing at all. For me, and we're going to end up talking mostly about Christianity because Arthur and I both were raised in the Christian tradition, and we live in a mostly Christian nation. So, well, he was Southern Baptist. It does have that effect. I think only Catholic has a worse effect on your life. But
the Catholics, they really sink the hook, man.
Yeah,
they really.
But you can.
Well, they have a longer tradition. They've been able to perfect it.
Anyway, so what I was saying was that when we looked at these songs, we're really talking about maybe is a more idealistic vision of what Christianity is really talking about, and maybe an attempt to explain and reform Christianity. In a very
Reform's
humble.
a big word now.
Well, I know, but I know what I mean by that is
intelligent critique.
Okay, an intelligent critique. Well, that
philosophical critique.
would be that would be a reform. I mean, which was to reform how we think about Jesus, reform how we think about God, and for me, that's what that song "Honk If You Love Judas" is about. Because
it damn sure is.
Jesus would have forgiven. Judas. Judas didn't give Jesus the chance.
That's right. An act of unrepentant despair. He went off and hung himself. So the story goes. Yeah, because I think Jesus' message was very clear. That's what the song is about. It's called Love. Love your enemies.
Yes. Pray for those who persecute you.
Somebody wants your coat, give me your underwear too. Walk the extra mile.
Yeah.
Do you think he was making that up? You would think so. What intrigues me about fundamentalism, so-called fundamentalism is love your enemy. It doesn't mean anything else. But the fundamentalists tend to take the Old Testament, I observe, literally. Methuselah, there's a guy that lived over 900 years. He's over 900 years old. The Red Sea really parted for Moses.
Adam and Eve are real people.
Yeah, a nice white couple that lived in the garden.
Yeah.
Hung out with God. Disobeyed the only damn rule they were given. Then that was supposed to be the first act of free will. That's hilarious. That's a little study right there in itself. But the fundamentalists overwhelmingly tend to go running to the Old Testament and take all those Aesop's fables is what they really are, and I think enlightened Jews would be, or forthright Jews would be the first to cop to that. These are teaching parables. The Old Testament could be, and I've read the Bible a couple of times from cover to cover, could be summed up as literally, okay, well maybe I fudged on numbers.
I haven't even come close.
Begat G-hat, and who gives a E-hat. But the Old Testament can be summed up as, when you walk with God, your life works. When you depart from God, your life turns into a disaster, up to and including fire and brimstone, or going into slavery, or being never able to see the promised land, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is that the fundamentalists want to take all that stuff literally. The Red Sea parted, Noah's flood really happened, the whole world was, Job, God sick. God and the devil were shooting dice and, picked, Job as like a lab rat to experiment on. God had money down that you can't break him. He's my man. And they take all that literally. But when it gets to Jesus, who said, love those who hate you, pray for those who persecute you. And in fact, be exceedingly glad when all that stuff happens to you, because in the same way, they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You're in good when you're catching all sorts of flack from the general public, basically. What Confederacy of Dunces, when the dunces are all in Confederacy, you may know a man of genius by this sign. The dunces are all in Confederacy against him.
Okay.
And Jesus knew that. So the point is that when the fundamentalists hear Jesus say, love your enemies, oh, he meant something else. Suddenly they get all theological and they go to preacher men who make a big deal of them poor little aborted fetuses that have to do with what, which is really what the root of all that intolerance is about, just like gay marriage. But they take Jesus' words and twist them into something else. Nobody talks about carpet bombing or having a nuclear stockpile.
Or some do, very few.
Very few.
Or executions.
Or social justice. Yeah. Right. Everybody's real quiet about that stuff. About loving your enemies. How many Christians keep a gun in your bedside table? What would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? Pull out a 9mm and blow away the burglar? This isn't cheap talk.
But so
if I had a gun, I'd kill somebody if they were trying to break in and hurt Katie.
That's
but
actually
you know what?
one
That's
of the
why I don't have a
reasons why
damn
we
gun
don't
in my
have
house.
one.
I've never had a gun. I never will.
Yeah. So why do they? take the Old Testament literally and metaphorically take the New Testament?
Take it. You got it.
Well, I was asking you because that was your proposition, but I would say because,
go for it.
I mean, from my perspective, because the New Testament's a lot harder. You know, Jesus, it requires an amazing sacrifice of those human desires for revenge and
personal property.
well, no, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, okay.
Like my woman, my possessions, what are we if not our possessions in the modern society where business is God Almighty? What do we represent if not our, that's what our nuclear is, just a giant, our nuclear deterrent, mutual assured destruction, mad.
Yeah, well, I guess I was just speaking more like if I think I'm wronged in some way, I give up the desire for revenge. I give up the desire for retribution, or if somebody, I guess, but then you say, like, if somebody asks, something of me, like my shirt, that is my private property, my personal property. And Jesus certainly did imply, give it up.
That's right. That's right.
So I remember a preacher man saying to Arthur once, it's easy for you.
Hey, you don't have a damn thing.
You don't own anything. So it's easy for you to say these things about giving up your property.
Yeah, but now I do. I have a little bit. But you know what? It really matters, too. I mean, you feel it. It owns you. It controls you. Mm-hmm. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose,
Yeah.
Ultimately, that extends to enlightenment. Like you're defending your ego. You're defending your brilliant opinion of everything. Even though God knows this is probably the most opinionated show on the air on URTV right now.
Well, in terms of it being all about our personal opinions, yes. I mean, that's basically what this show is.
We've been stuck in a bastion of Republican golfer gated community hellhole for too many years. We have a lot to say. And so that's why we moved to Asheville, in a place that hopefully is tolerant enough, I think, to hear it and give us a little bit of encouragement. We don't need it. I've learned that one. If you need other people, you're whistling Dixie Pixie.
Well, one of the things I really liked about Arthur when I first met him was I felt like he was trying to rescue Jesus from Christianity. That from the way I had been raised in a liberal church, was a United Church of Christ, and Jesus was, he was kind of lost, I guess you could say. I mean, he existed, of course, but it really wasn't about him. I would think in the Christian tradition, Jesus should be your guru. That's how I thought of Jesus when I was kind of a young teenager. And I was kind of disabused of that, notion that, you can't emulate Jesus. And so to me, Christianity just became sort of a social club where you'd go on Sundays just to kind of hope that, hope for heaven. And it just didn't really seem any point to it to me. And when I met Arthur, some of the songs he wrote about Christianity, it was like it was bringing Jesus back to life. It was saying, follow the example that Jesus set. And one of his songs, actually it was his first song, Dream Messiah, really just lays it out there so clearly. And it was like, yes, this is a Christianity I can believe in, because it puts Jesus front and center, and it asks you to be as Christ. That's it. That's it. You don't have to believe in anything else except, what did Jesus stand for? Love, compassion,
the truth.
The truth.
The truth, which I just wrote this morning. Love, truth, God, compassion. Because compassion is just an expression of love. Love, God, and truth are the same thing. They're literally synonymous. And they're in everything. They underlie everything. If you listen to this show at all, that's what we believe. That's the core of everything. And Frank said, I think people are basically good at heart. We think people are basicly God at heart. Doesn't mean you're God. It means God's you in a state of amnesia, experiencing life as you.
And, I learned from a philosopher that our philosophy, a lot of people think it would be called pantheism. But pantheism means there's all sorts of gods out there. Everything, there's a God in this microphone. There's a God in this guitar. There's a God in this pick. And that's not what we're talking about. Our philosophy is more panentheism, which means there is only God, that God is everything, but there is nothing in this world that is God. But there is nothing that is not God at the same time. We are all just, manifestations isn't quite the right word, but
So to get back to the basic core critique, if you will, and we're talking about Christianity here, that love is the key. Love is the key. Any religion, any belief that does not have love at its core, and we've defined love in an earlier show. I'm not going to go through this, but we define it as the experience of unconditional acceptance of what is. You could say, I accept that you're robbing me. What do I need to do? And I know, because I'm seeing you objectively, I know you're insane. That's why you're doing what you're doing, even if you're driving nails in my wrist. But what can I do to pacify you, to serve you, even when you're doing this to me, like the Good Samaritan? I mean, that's what it is. If that isn't the core of the teaching, you're full of beans. You're kidding yourself. And you're exactly the kind of person in the Christian category, that Jesus will say, I don't care if you say you did all the stuff in my name. I don't know who you're. I don't know you. You're not going to make it because your heart isn't true. Your heart isn't filled with love. And it's really hard to do that. It's much easier to make a big fuss about abortion, some inflammatory issue like that, than it is to disarm your country and to not have a $1 trillion, $1,000 billion a year going to defense, going to the military-industrial complex, being played for a sucker by giant corporate interests that are running the United States. And we'll save that for the politics show next week. It's hard. Like, what was the great line of the Colonel in Scent of a Woman, when Pacino's character said at the school when he was defending the young man, he said, now all my life I've known what the right thing to do, and I've almost never done it. And you know why? Because it was too damn hard. And you want to know it flat out, what I feel from my heart? I've been in the church twice. I've been saved twice in my adult life. Had some incredible experiences in the church. And both times I walked away because the theology was so primitive and so horribly mistaken that it just made me sick at heart. I couldn't bear it. The last time I walked out was when during the beginning of the Gulf War, when I heard a deacon of the church get up and start to say, Lord, we thank you, Father, for the work you're doing in the Gulf. The bombing had just started, and all the amen, amen. And it's, you know what? I don't need this anymore. You people are off the wall wrong. And, maybe now's the time to kind of maybe think about that. Maybe think that why do I not raise my voice about war? Why do I remain silent in the face of American imperialism and, military intervention all over the world, that we bomb who we want, when we want, and act like it's okay? Why do I remain silent when prisoners are treated to rape and violence in our own jails, which makes it a lot easier to tolerate, them they're terrorists, when we haul them off to Guantanamo and indulge in prisoner abuse and torture and murder, the United States of America. Remember when we had our reputation? Because it's too hard. Because it's easier to let other people do the dirty work and do foul deeds in our name just so we won't be disturbed and we can be comfortable in our American lifestyle. In case you haven't noticed, we're in real trouble. The world is in trouble. This country's in trouble. Anyway, end of mini sermon. That's my message. Why don't we do Dream Messiah?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. Yeah. I think we said we're going to do it in A.
Okay.
Tell the story about
this is my first song. I tried to write my own songs for many years. By trying, once every 6 months, I'd get out a pen and a pad of paper and just labor, and it was pretentious nonsense. It was awful. And all of my friends who wrote their own music, I would worship them. I thought it was just the coolest thing that could be to write your own music, but I couldn't. So I went to Kathmandu, and I was over there enjoying looking at the mountains and having a good time. And I contracted a disease called Guillain-Barré syndrome, French polio. I was paralyzed from the neck down. I had to be flown back to the States with a doctor in attendance, ready to do a trach on the plane, which I stopped just that short of. 6 months later, in a rehab center in Florida, maybe 3 or 4 months later, it was an occupational therapy department. And I always thought if I could write one song that didn't make me throw up, it would break the ice, and I could, the rest would come, which turned out to be true. Just one that didn't make me sick. And sitting in a wheelchair, unable to move from the neck down, with a stick in my teeth with a rubber tip on the end, I typed this song out on an IBM Selectric on an elevated table in OT. And it wasn't bad. Didn't make me sick. And this is it.
What an introduction. This
Songs
is a song
that didn't make me sick. My first album. 1, 2, 3. A dream that I was walking by the Sea of Galilee, when a man strangely familiar fell in step alongside me and said, "Be you not doubtful, for surely it is me. I am the man whose words they have undone." His eyes were mighty oceans, adrift in boundless love. Such laughter overflowed them as lifting them above. He shouted down the heavens a joyous prophecy that all who lived would join him in completed unity. I want to hear the voice of the one calling through the darkness. Let it calm the stormy tempest in my mind. I want to see the light of the one whose soul was shining, show the path ahead. I feel so left behind. I really did too. They built to me great temples, when temples I need none, except the temple that is you and all you can become. I showed the challenge to them, be perfect as I am. The kingdom lies within you. I am not God's only lamb. The cross they hung my flesh on, I knew would come to be a symbol lost in nonsense and a mockery of me. They had to kill my manhood and make me God's one child, and not a person just like you who chose life undefiled. I want to hear the voice of the one calling through the darkness. Let it calm the stormy tempest in my mind. I want to see the light of the one whose soul was shining, show the path ahead. I feel so left behind. None comes into the Father except he comes by me. By me means not this human form, not Jesus, can't you see? By me means love, the single way, when all true paths are one. Except this love's consuming you, your journey's just begun. They make their last beds hoping that hell, death will set them free and take them on to heaven, or hell, if it must be. These places do not wait for death. Let He who has ears hear. For hell and heaven all depend on whether love is here. I want to hear the voice of the one calling through the darkness. Let it calm the stormy tempest in my mind. I want to see the light of the one whose soul was shining. Show the path ahead. I feel so left behind. Don't look for clouds of angels when I return again. You see, I've never left you. I've always been within. You worshipers, depart from me. I'll never heed your call until your love lights up this world and touches one and all. I want to hear the voice of the one calling through the darkness. Let it calm the stormy tempest in my mind. I want to see the light of the one whose soul was shining. Show the path ahead. I feel so left behind. Show the path ahead. I feel so left behind.
Wow. Like I said, I mean, I could see teaching a whole course on a new interpretation of Christianity using that as the text. I mean, it's just so full and rich of new ways, radical ways of seeing Jesus, who was a radical.
But it all comes down to the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, religious wars, that's an obscenity. That's an oxymoron. You're not religious at all. You're not following anybody. I don't know anything about Mohammedism, but if he preached that, he's full of beans. You know, peace be upon him. He needs all the peace he can get. You know, people blowing themselves up for religion. Basically, any religion. What do they have in the bonfire of the vanities? Anybody who, you know, they were listing a series of demands to the Catholic Church, and the first demand was anyone who puts on a military uniform is automatically excommunicated.
No, this isn't Bonfire of the Vanities. You're talking about...
Sorry, boy, that was really off.
Yeah.
Getting old.
Tom Robbins.
That was Tom Robbins, another Roadside Attraction, Tom Robbins' first book. Uh-huh. Yep, it's a contradiction. We should just jump into this one. Let's just do those, maybe.
Okay, sure.
You want to?
Sure.
Yeah, because this is in the same, you know, and then maybe we'll, you know, get into something else. But this is the same message. You just wrote this one. I have to read it. 1, 2, 3. You can't be a Christian with a gun in your hand. You can follow Jesus and ignore his command to love and keep loving. You can't misunderstand. No, you can't be a Christian. You can't be a Christian. No, you can't be a Christian with a gun in your hand. You flock to your churches, say you trust in your Lord, then you follow a man who just preaches the sword. You never scorn war or the death penalty, or brandishing H-bombs to kill all you see. No, you can't be a Christian. No, you can't. You can't be a Christian, no. You can't be a Christian. No, you can't be a Christian with a gun in your hand. Your Savior once told you to never strike back, to love those who hate you and forgive the attack. Well, lethal injections and bombs from above will never be seen as expressions of love. Duh, you can't be a Christian. No, you can't be a Christian, no. You can't be a Christian. You can't be a Christian with that pea shooter in your bedtime table. Oh, you say that you're saved and to heaven you'll go. Just as soon as you die, then you'll get that halo. So why do you fight and kill others for life when death is your ticket right out of the strife? Could it be that you're not really sure as you say, that maybe just some devil has led you astray? Could it be that your faith is not really that strong, that maybe you're scared you might even be wrong? No, you can't be a Christian. Can't be a Christian. Can't be a Christian. No, you can't be a Christian with a gun in your hand. Now, Jesus said clearly to go pick up your cross. He never said his way would be without loss, 'cause he knew that love is the way to be free. Even if you wind up on a cross, don't you see? To give up in love brings the spirit alive. For any gorilla can fight back to survive. But Jesus said, put down your fear and your hate and trust in love's power before it's too late. You can't be a Christian. Hell no, can't be a Christian. You can't be a Christian. No, you can't be a Christian with a gun in your hand. A gun in your hand. With a gun in your hand.
Just recently, someone we know who's a nurse said that something that had been she'd found really odd was that people who were she was in the heart wing of the hospital, and that people who were old and had real severe heart problems and were Christian were still really reluctant to die, and she couldn't understand that. She thought, well, you know, if they're Christian and they believe in heaven and they believe they're going to heaven, why would you be afraid to die? And I really, that's an interesting part of that song. It's like, why, you know, that if you really believe your theology is true and you're saved, you're going to heaven. So if you are killed, eternal peace with your Savior is waiting for you. Wouldn't you? Why preserve a few years on this life when you've got that waiting for you? You know, do you really? Maybe the question is you don't believe it. But what?
Well, the question is you don't. The thing is you really don't know. Nobody sent a postcard.
But what I thought of also, actually, I wanted to get to was, we were talking about the violence. You know, that Christianity doesn't condemn violence. Well, hell is an incredibly violent philosophy. I mean, and that's
so
you know, it's not like we say like going to war. Well, that's what humans do. Well, here's a violence that God does, and that's an inbuilt, functioning part of the Christian religion is violence perpetrated in eternity against the majority of humankind.
Let's face it.
Who are part of this creation made by this Creator. So yeah, and if anyone watches the South Park films, that's one of the wonderful things. There's like a few thousand have gone to heaven, and the billions and counting. The number of people in hell is just going so fast you can barely see it spin. But Christianity posits an amazingly violent God, and and you can look back into the Old Testament, which has a very violent God. And I think that's one of the reasons a lot of preachers really like preaching out of the Old Testament, because it justifies violence. Because God is always bringing down wrath on somebody or other, either the chosen people because they screwed up in one way or another, or against, or giving justification to his chosen people. Our cat has come back to see us again.
She wants to be on the show.
She does. We were thinking we need to get like a little perch up here so she can be here while we do
the I Ching dog. We'll have the
question of meaning cat. Well, I wanted to get. I'm working on this project that. And I've been doing a little research into the meaning of this word, which is kind of odd, and theodicy, which I had never heard until recently. And it kind of, when I first heard it, it sounded like the combination of the word for God, from theological, and idiocy. That's how it first struck me. So what is this? The idiocy of believing in God? That seems like maybe what an atheist would have as their. But no, theodicy. It actually comes the idiocy part comes from a Greek word which means justice, and so this is a branch of philosophy trying to explain how a good God could create or be responsible for a world in which there is so much suffering.
Good question.
And as far as I can tell from the reading I've been doing about this, people have had a very hard time answering that question. I mean, through across all religions and through many centuries, nobody's really come up with a very satisfactory answer to that question. And
at least in the Western religions.
Well, in the East, they kind of seem to boot it, from what I can tell. In the Buddhists, there is no God. God, the world was not created. And what Buddha talked about a lot about suffering, but Buddha talked about how very practical ways in which to deal with suffering, but it had nothing to do with God.
But it was to escape the wheel of reincarnation in Buddhism.
Yeah.
You have to eventually become enlightened. So what's that? What's home base? Where do you get to?
As far as I can tell, and I'm not an expert on
You just
Buddhism.
don't come back? That's your reward? You just
Seemingly.
disappear? I question that. I wonder if it's...
I mean, and so some Buddhists, if you're watching,
some reward. I'll stay here and suffer,
give us an answer. What is the ultimate? Even if there is no God, if there's no creator, why bother? Except to stop suffering. And Hindu, there's a whole lot of different beliefs in Hinduism, they're definitely
that's the source of the whole concept of the whole thing is illusion. It's Maya. It's the play of God.
Right.
The universe is God just playing in human form. And,
right. I would say the Hindu is the closest to what I believe.
Yeah,
we believe
our book,
here,
The Game
definitely.
of God, Recovering Your True Identity, that's exactly what it's about.
Right.
That the only way the unlimited can experience limitation and therefore be unlimited is to forget itself and immerse itself in form, be lost in form for, say, 125 billion year universe cycle, play every part from unicellular organism to electron to, advanced, civilizations beyond our wildest imagination, and eventually wake up to its true identity.
So we would say that suffering that's just part of this inbuilt aspect of the limitation, and it's really is an illusion.
To be lost is to suffer.
And, when you realize your true identity, the suffering disappears. So, but in, say, the Christian religion, suffering is real. I mean, and we're talking about suffering on an eternal, if you go to hell, that's part of
nothing worse.
Hell is you're
nothing
suffering
is worse.
forever.
Never-ending torment. Give me a break.
Right.
It's like something Hitler would dream, like a wet dream. Adolf Hitler.
So how could a good God, how could a just God, how could a God who is omnipotent, that meant when God created the universe, God knew that this universe would result in billions of people going to hell and suffering torment forever. Why would that God create a universe knowing that was going to happen? Think about it. How could that be a good God that would condemn all those people to torment?
Good.
Okay,
right
so
on.
let's look at some answers here. And here's one. This is a real interesting one. That because God's ways are not our ways, we don't understand the
I love this one. God moves in mysterious ways.
And so and we just went through a perfect example of this. You got Guillain-Barré syndrome. I imagine you suffered during months and months when you...
Especially at first, the first few, I've spent about 6 weeks on the ICU and watched people die every day. Yeah, that was rough.
Okay, so there was suffering there. However, a higher good came maybe not higher good, but you wrote a song.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey,
got my first song out of it.
So we, our idea of what, that suffering brings about greater good. And that when you look at the universe from God's perspective and God's scheme of things, all human suffering is results in greater good.
For what?
But, well,
What
that's a
greater
good
good?
question. I mean,
I'd like
not
to know.
necessarily in my life. I mean, just
No,
think
I
of.
mean, you know how many people die in their ignorance?
That's right.
Everybody.
Right.
Except an enlightened saint. Anybody know any enlightened
Well,
saints
just think
out
of-
there?
So those people that died in the German concentration camps. I mean, what greater good resulted in their life?
Well, that guy that wrote that book, that Conversations with God, he would say something. The German. You ready for this? This is a big selling New Age book. His conclusion was that the Germans really served the Jews by helping a lot of them cross over. That's verbatim from that book.
Yeah,
Whee!
yeah. I never understood why that was so popular. I mean, because people never seem to notice. Anyway, so that was one explanation, Christian explanation for suffering. How a good God could create a bad universe, or a universe in which so much bad happens. Another one is free will, of course. That
perennial favorite.
That without bad, good would have no meaning. That if God had not created a universe in which we had the ability to choose bad, it would be meaningless. There would be no meaning for us being good. So the bad exists so we can ultimately be good and choose God. One of the, just to begin with, there is some merit in terms of, like you say, the relativity of the universe. I mean, you can't have bad and good.
Down.
But we're talking about from a perspective where ultimately there is no losing. Ultimately, it's, everything is resolved in the one. Christians are talking about a situation in which if you don't make the right choices in your short life. You may have 10 years, you may have 20, you may have 75. But in that span of time, if you make the wrong choices, you're condemned to suffering and punishment for eternity. I mean, so we're talking about God creating a universe where the rules are a little bit they're not really clear-cut enough. Let me just say that. I mean, how many people lived before Jesus even walked the earth and never even had the chance?
I was 5 years old and asked my grandmother, what happens to the people that never heard about Jesus? And she says, well, that's why we have missionaries. We're trying to get to them just as quickly as we can. Yikes.
Right.
5 years old.
What if you choose the wrong denomination? What if it's the Mormons?
That's right, South Park again.
Yeah, that's right.
You're all wrong, the devil said to the legions of.
Wasn't there some branch around here that it was like, it's not God, it's Yahweh, and you have to go to church on Saturday.
You can't use the name Jesus. That's Yahweh. That's otherwise you're doomed. Can you say anthropomorphism? Just like putting our human foibles on the divine and things like. We talked about a few shows ago. It's like we're like well, go ahead. Well, you're on a roll there. I like it.
Well, so I mean, we're just going through different thinking about. And I've been trying to find out in Islam, and that's a little bit more difficult. It's going to take me some more time to figure that one out.
You can be sure one thing. Allah didn't tell you to go strap dynamite on your waist. Even though Westerners have done that forever. One of my favorite tortures on the Roman Catholic Inquisition, remember the good old Inquisition, was pouring molten metal in the mouth of victims. Can you imagine what that is like to the delicate tissues of the mouth? Molten metal in the name of Jesus,
Well, some people may be sitting out there thinking, well, maybe your whole problem is the belief in God to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we could just resolve all these issues by saying, God does not exist, So the reason there's suffering and pain in this universe and what some people call evil is because it's just that's the nature of the beast. And the universe is nothing but atoms and something happened, Big Bang, whatever, and it's just a bunch of random events happening out there. And so our attempts to put meaning into it is what causes us suffering, you could say. Because if you just quit trying to explain it away and quit trying to figure out how a God, it's like it's just these mind games that humans seem to be.
Well, there's the mind game of how do you stop polio? There's those kind of mind games. One of the cornerstones of our work is that there is no satisfaction available in a state of ignorance. The unknown is the source of all fear. And the source of all hatred is fear. And those are perpetual states. As long as we don't know, we are in a state of basically the psychological equivalent of animal flight fight behavior. And those are not comfortable states. And we are put here. We will not be satisfied. We will not attain any kind of real peace, or peace, period. Peace is peace. P-E-A-C-E. And you could use that as a double entendre. Until we know. And that's what evolution is. From unicellular, from a molten ball of planet stuff spinning around our star with that cools off and forms gases and makes rain, and it has the necessary heavy elements to produce life because it was a result of a supernova, this whole solar system. And and finally unicellular life forms and evolves up until we have meat suits and lab coats saying there is no God. Brilliant conclusion. But I don't want to really get sidetracked on that, because we'll do a show on atheism or agnosticism. An agnostic, by the way, this is my own definition. An agnostic is an atheist smart enough to cover his ass.
Well, I guess what I'm thinking about it, like, okay, I can understand why a lot of atheistic arguments, and it's interesting that the church of the Christian church that seems to be basically filled with atheists, which is the Unitarian Universalists, is in many ways
tax write-off.
The most concerned with social justice. That seems to be kind of what they're a club for people who are really into trying to bring about a better world. But what I wonder is, how do you have any desire to improve your own life if you don't believe in any purpose to the universe? I mean, what's the point? Why not? If you don't think there's a God, if you don't think there's anything that's going to happen, that there's any real reason for the universe to exist, why would you do anything but have the best time you could have?
Oh, I got a good answer for you. I'll play devil's advocate.
Explain.
Yeah. I mean, like a lot of my Jewish buddies over the years, they don't believe in God at all. I think a lot of Jews don't have a religious bone in their body. The temple stuff is just kind of solidarity time once a week. Circle your wagons against the goy hordes. So what it is if this is it, if this life is all there is, then you need to make the best of it. And that is, you assess the lay of the land, and you do your very best to make yourself comfortable, to raise your children, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, as far as I'm concerned,
that's a good reason to work hard and make a lot of money, so you have a bit more, a richer life, and your children have a richer life. I understand that part, but I understand, why would you go out and help the poor?
Probably,
if you're an atheist.
Well, it's like paying a certain kind of insurance. Like, let's face it, we don't believe in Medicaid out of the goodness of our hearts. Pardon my cynicism. I'm 64 years old. You tend to lose your illusions every time. I'm still a radical, revolutionary, liberal. That part doesn't change. But, we like foreign aid. We don't give that out of the goodness of our heart. It's buying them off. It's like, it's a way of meddling in other people's affairs and throwing welfare in the corner of the cage to kind of bunch them over there and keep them from coming to visit us in our gated communities, Showing up with a butcher knife at the Chamber Music Festival, that kind of
you
stuff.
You can see we've just moved from...
You didn't have to say that. We're going to bleep that. I didn't want to comp on our mystery location where we're from.
I thought you'd already said it.
I haven't.
Oh, well.
Anyway.
On this day of internet, you don't think people could find out where we lived if anybody really cared?
Anyway, so what I'm saying is that all that stuff we do for the poor, I mean, that's pretty cynical, I admit. If you really think, because that could be part of maintaining, it'd be the responsible thing to do. And that also diminishes, because God knows, I've heard atheists ask me this, why do you have to believe in God to be good?
Right.
It's perfectly, I'm not going to denigrate their desire to help their fellow human being.
Well, I
But,
just
you know,
said that the church that I think is mostly atheist is the one that seems to be most about helping other people. So I'm really kind of trying to figure it out. What is the impulse? I mean, is it that you
because God is within them. They don't know it. They think they're atheists, but it's really the goodness that's innate in us. God, Anne Frank, I think, people are basically good at heart. We think people are basically God at heart, even if they don't know it. Even if they're walking around being dyed in the hardcore atheists who just think anybody who believes in that is just inventing them out of their own deep insecurity. If God didn't exist, it would be necessary to invent him to give us a pacifier to get through life so we can cope with the horror of impending oblivion.
The existential angst.
Oh, yeah, I love that one.
Yes.
Young girl told us once her psychiatrist had told her she suffered from existential angst. Oh, golly, oh, gee. It's like saying, I think you're suffering from breathing.
That's right. If you have a brain in your head, you should suffer from existential angst, which is just saying, why am I here? That's all that is.
4-minute warning. Is that 4 minutes?
No, 9.
9 minutes, okay.
Well, maybe we could do another song.
Okay.
And humanists out there, because I was thinking atheists, maybe they call themselves humanists. And so maybe what that means is that seeing a deep, it's like we are all one family in essence, the human family. And so they see, desire to take care of members of our own family. That's what would make them a humanist. Yeah. And I can, that...
It's pragmatic. That's why we say love is the optimum form of survival. Love isn't some airy-fairy, flowers and kisses, weakling, bleeding heart liberal is supposed to sound like, I'm so weak and, politically correct. And, it's not. It's awesome in what it requires and what it calls for. And it's incredibly, our definition, the experience of unconditional acceptance of what is. It's facing reality, not flighting or fighting from it, not fighting against it or flighting from it, but looking it in the eye and dealing with what is. And part of dealing with what is human suffering. If we really practiced Christianity, we'd light this world up very quickly. We would become one family, a human family. And I can understand why atheists feel a deep revulsion for religion, the nonsense like molten metal treatment to bring you around to Christ. Stuff like that's been going on forever. I mean, religion has stood in the way. Galileo had to recant on his knees and, in fear of being burned at the stake.
In modern day prosperity gospels, taking poor people's hard-earned money to, with the hope that it's going to bring them returns.
That's right.
They just get poorer as a result.
That's right. So, and it's understandable. We got to get the compassion in here too. What happened to Christianity? How it got hijacked? But Jesus said, many will come saying, Lordy, Lordy, didn't we do this or that in your name? I mean, think about it, because it's where is the voice for the love of Christ, the pacifism of Christ. If you don't think Jesus was a pacifist, you are not reading your scriptures, folks. And I'm not talking about Pollyanity. I'm talking about Jesus.
And what about the one time Jesus lost his temper? We all know that.
I went to a Southern Baptist, thank God, very loosely raised in Southern baptism. And, like I said, I was saved twice by times in my adult life. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. But we had these Sunday school fans back in Florida, the Baptist church. And one of the favorite pictures on the funeral home fan.
Right.
Plan ahead. Captive audience. Anyway, was the picture of Jesus with a whip just beating the hell out of the money changers. They were fleeing, and he was just laying the whip on them, and looking really pissed off. And we used to say as little kids, that's the only time that Jesus ever lost his temper. Trying to deal with us. And if you read the scripture, there's another way of reading that passage. It says,
he turned the tables over.
He made a whip of cords and drove all cattle and sheep from the temple.
Right.
He drove the animals with a whip. He didn't lay it on the backs of the money changers.
Yeah.
Just You know, and I come not to bring peace, but a sword. Throw that one at me. Look that up. Look up the scriptural reference to that, and you will see that sword.
It refers to
Micah?
a passage in, I believe,
I think
Mike,
it's
one of the
Micah.
last books of the Old Testament.
When it says, when you start walking the spiritual path, you're going to be divided. You're going to be separated from the people who are still walking in darkness. You're not going to get supported. They're going to persecute you and turn their backs on you. Don't even trust the one who's lying in bed with you at night, even she who lies next to you. And that's the sword. That's what it says. Actually, it's the woman's fault. This is,
Hey, since
the old
Eve,
days
okay?
when, man.
Well, I mean, it goes all the way back
We
to
knew
Eve.
what the problem was. That's right. It starts with Eve. You're damn right.
But anyway, you're right.
Woe
the
be
sword,
unto man. Man.
The sword of spirituality will separate you from people in your life who are not on the spiritual path.
That's right. So, guy talked about love, okay? Even though they got some wacky stuff in there like virgin birth. And
okay,
you know,
Arthur,
when the Catholic Church codified Mary's ascended into heaven, a lot of Protestants probably don't know that Mary was actually taken up into heaven when she died. Do you know when that became official Catholic Church doctrine? In the 1950s.
Yep.
Probably just about the time they added under God and
That's right.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, so if we're going to do the song, we better get moving.
What is it? I forgot.
Bringer of the Day?
Oh, okay.
Oh, we're doing G. Okay.
I don't know. No.
We did it on B flat,
B
actually.
flat, all right. You can tell this show is unrehearsed. Anyway, it's understandable. We're all bozos on this bus, and it's called evolution. But we better evolve pretty quick. 1, 2, 3. I've been sleeping oh so very deeply. I'd been dreaming in a dream so long. I'd forgotten what was real around me, unaware this dream world was all wrong. I'd been dreaming that my eyes were open. I'd been dreaming that I knew my way. It was like a spell that went unbroken, real enough to hold me in its sway till the bringer of the day, bringer of the light, chase the night away with a dawn so bright. Now I can only pray that you'll always stay, you who light the way, bringer of the day. And you touched me, and there in the darkness I knew. And you shook me, and you proved that this dream wasn't true. You woke me, and then you led me from my bed of night, and you turned me to the dawn, while the true light broke upon me through the curtains you had drawn. Bringer of the day, bringer of the light, chase the night away with a dawn so bright. Now I can only pray that you'll always stay, you who light the way, bringer of the day. Now I see how very hopeless I lay, trapped within that dream's deceitful play, till your golden rays came shining my way. Blessed bringer of the day, bringer of the day, bringer of the light, chase the night away with a dawn so bright. Now I can only pray that you'll always stay, you who are the way, bringer of the day, bringer of the day, bringer of the day.
Well, thanks for watching A Question to Meaning, and I hope you'll tune in again.
God bless.